January 1915, the Russian Tsar, panicking at the Turkish advance on Sarıkamış, urged the Allies to attack Turkey. The British agreed.
This is one of the greatest campaigns in history. Think what Constantinople is to the east. It is more than London, Paris and Berlin, all rolled into one, are to the west. Think what its fall will mean.
This was the battle which might turn the war. It could cut Germany's route to the east, unlock the Balkans, and open up Russia via the Black Sea. But first, the Navy would have to force its way through the Dardanelles Straits. The French insisted on being involved, not wanting the British to dominate the Mediterranean. On the 18th of March 1915, a combined French and British fleet attacked the Straits.
The flagship was hit by a large number of high-caliber shells. The turret was put out of action, and all its crew killed. The flames didn't spare anything. Our young men, a few minutes earlier so alert and courageous, were all skeletons lying on the bare steel, blackened, carbonized.
The Turkish guns survived the naval bombardment. The Allied ships were sitting ducks.
I told the battery commander, Rafat Bey, to increase fire. He replied that shells are exploding on the decks of the enemy ships. There is considerable damage to them.
The French battleship Bouvet hit a mine. 3 battleships were sunk that day, 3 crippled, 4 damaged. The Allies lost over 700 men. It was a remarkable victory for the Ottoman Empire. The Allies tried again. This time, the Navy would support an amphibious landing of troops. The Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, known as Anzacs, joined French and British soldiers. Contrary to later myth, the Anzacs weren't rough, tough diggers from the outback. They were mostly city dwellers, many first-generation British immigrants, fighting for the mother country. Turks like Behzadi Kerim knew this would be a fight for their country's survival.
I will sacrifice myself for my faith, my country, my dear Istanbul. I will crush the dirty, loathsome hands reaching out to threaten my old father's happiness, my innocent baby's life, my beloved wife's honor. I shall be as hard-hearted as an Englishman. I salute you, O apple of my eye, Istanbul. Those who are about to die bid you farewell.
On the 25th of April 1915, 70,000 Allied troops went ashore on the peninsula of Gelibolu, Gallipoli. A post-war film reconstructed the battle. Private Robert Atkinson witnessed what was then the greatest seaborne invasion ever.
Troops in small boats being towed ashore effect a landing. Terrific bombardment, awful noise rolling around the cliffs. Surprise the Turks. Splendid gunnery by the Navy. Awe-inspiring scene. My first experience of battle.
The Anzacs were landed in the wrong place. 8,000 men struggled ashore on a narrow strip of sand hemmed in by steep hills. The men christened it Anzac Cove.
The Turks welcomed us with shrapnel and sprayed up the sea all about us, but very few of us got hit. There didn't seem much organisation on the shore. In fact, it was disorganisation.
Breaking out of Anzac Cove, the casualties soared. New Zealander William Malone blamed the folly and incompetence of Australian officers.
Colonel Braun had no defensive position, no plan. Nothing but a murderous notion that the only thing to do was to plunge troops out of the neck of the ridge into the jungle beyond.
It was on these Turkish hills that Australian and New Zealand national identities were forged.
We were singing "This Bit of the World Belongs to Us." Much swearing and cheering, we charged up a hill so steep in places we could only just scramble up. Clean over a machine gun we went, men dropping all around me. It was mad, wild, thrilling.
The Anzacs would have had an easier time if it had been left to the German general Liman von Sanders. He was holding troops back for an attack 9 miles away that never came. But a 34-year-old Turkish officer, Mustafa Kemal, climbed the peak of Çanakkale and saw the Anzac troops approaching, and his own men fleeing.
"Why are you running away?" I asked. "The enemy, sir," they said. "You mustn't run away from the enemy. We've no more ammunition," they replied. I ordered them to fix their bayonets and lie down, and as they did so, the enemy too lay down. We had won time.
Mustafa Kemal issued a stark command.
"I don't order you to attack. I order you to die. By the time we are dead, other units and commanders will have come up to take our place."
He sent an angry letter to Enver Pasha, damning their German allies.
Liman von Sanders did not know either our army or our country, and did not have time to study the situation properly. I urge you strongly not to rely on the mental ability of the Germans headed by von Sanders, whose hearts and souls are not engaged as ours are in the defense of our country.
The Turks contained the Anzac breakout at the Cove. Gallipoli made a hero out of Mustafa Kemal. Within 8 years he became his country's leader, earning the name Ataturk, father of the Turks. The British landing at V Beach went badly. The plan was to run the ship River Clyde onto the shore, her hold no longer full of coal, but men. But she went aground further out, exposing the British to withering Turkish fire.
The enemy commanders were sending the men down the ramps. But they could not escape the Turkish bullets. Our fire was very effective, knocking the enemy into the sea. The shore at V Beach was full of enemy corpses, like shoals of fish. The color of the sea changed with the blood from their bodies.
The other landings went well, but initial success was not quickly exploited. The Allied campaign under General Sir Ian Hamilton was cursed by poor coordination. As on the Western Front, the two sides dug into a bitter trench war. Here, an Australian cameraman scrambles back to help his assistant under fire. French officer Jean Giraudoux watched the war turn brutal.
The Australians massacre all the Turks. One Australian told me that the Turks are their national enemy.
The conditions at Gallipoli were terrible. Intense heat bitter cold, little water. Major Burge wrote home to his mother.
Respected Madam, sitting fearlessly about 200 yards from 2 million bloodthirsty Turks, I take up my pen. I forgot to mention I've got about 6 feet of solid earth between me and them. The sun is very hot and I am very thirsty. The only thing there is to drink is water that comes from a nasty well, which tastes as if it had a dead mule in it. However, we are given purifying tablets, which are very good, and make the water taste as if it had 2 dead mules in it.
To my highborn royal wife, Ayşe, from your husband, Mustafa Mehmet, Captain, 13th Turkish Infantry. Oh, Ayşe, my morning star. I pray God to bring this all to an end. I can see our lovely Constantinople in ruins and our houses burnt to the ground. These English are very persistent. There is no fear of death for them. They're very cruel. They watch us like wolves in the night and are upon us like the devil in the day. And why did we join in this wicked war? Ayşe, I must now take my leave of you as the sun is sinking and I must away to my devotion. God bless you, Ayşe. I wish I were at home to give you my adorations.
But Ayşe never received Mustafa's letter. It was found on his dead body by a British soldier. The Turks lost 10,000 men in one afternoon. As spring turned into summer, the stench of the dead became unbearable. Eventually an armistice was called to bury the dead. Many Turkish soldiers were illiterate. Their experiences were reflected in their songs.
Çanakkale içinde vurdular beni. Çanakkale içinde vurdular beni. Ölmeden mezara koydular beni. Oh, geçtim eyvah.
Disease became a major killer, particularly typhus and dysentery.
My old pal. He was smart and upright as a guardsman. After about 10 days, to see him crawling about, his backside hanging out. We were trying to lower him down into the latrine. I don't know what happened, but he simply rolled into this foot-wide trench. We couldn't pull him out, we didn't have any strength. He drowned in his own excrement.
Allied resolve was weakening, as Lieutenant Colonel Fahrettin realized, writing to his father.
The morale of his troops has sunk so low as to be beyond description. These fellows will eventually have to embark their troops and remove them one of these nights.
On the 20th of December 1915, they did just that. Turkish officer İzzettin Bey was woken by the duty officer at 3 o'clock in the morning.
They had spotted many frigates and military transport ships. They thought it was a new invasion. But on the contrary, the British were running away. Their situation had become hopeless. What had happened was victory and the will of Allah.
Turkish troops enter abandoned Allied trenches. They did not fire on the retreating Allies. happy just to see them go. After 9 terrible months, the hills of Gallipoli fell silent. Both sides had suffered around 250,000 casualties. But for the Turks, it was a triumph.
When the enemy finally withdrew, Constantinople was decorated from one end to the other. At night, the minarets were lit up with oil lamps. Everyone was full of joy. Pale faces began to smile. Constantinople came back to life.